Hey everybody, Justin Menzies here, and in this video I just want to share my testimony with you and kind of what God's brought me out of and where I've come from, so you get to know me just a little bit more and just understand why I am the way I am, and why I'm passionate like I am about the Lord and just what He's done in my life. And so I'll just dive right into it. I was born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and to Christian parents. I have an older brother and a younger sister whom I love very much. And when I was 8 months old, we moved to Pasadena, to California, where my dad went to chiropractic school, and we were down there for 4 years. And then when he finished school, we moved back up to Calgary when I was about 5 years old. And I grew up here in Calgary pretty much my whole life, apart from that. And we went to church, and we read our Bibles on Sundays. My dad would often do devotionals with us, which is where I gleaned a lot of understanding, and I learned a lot about the faith and about the Bible, and it was good. But for me, it's not why I believed in God. For me, it was there was in my heart of hearts, I just knew that God was a reality. I just knew He was real. I didn't feel like I knew Him super well, but what I did know is I felt like He was really kind. But I learned about God in church, but I didn't really get to know Him there, like on a personal level. I just kind of knew about Him. And so the reality of God's existence wasn't really in question for me. I could feel Him in my heart. I just knew He was real. And looking at creation, it was just like, of course this has been fashioned and created by a creator. And so that was kind of the extent of my Christian journey at that point, growing up until around 14 or so. But around 11, 12, I just started to get really angry, and I started to really butt heads with my parents, and I had a really lousy perspective on life, and I kind of felt sorry for myself, and I just got into a really negative place in my mind, and that kind of intensified in 1999 when I became friends with a bunch of kids in my neighborhood, on my block, and we kind of got in trouble together, and I started smoking cigarettes, and I started smoking weed, and I had my very first serious girlfriend in 1999. She lived on the same block as me, and so I ended up losing my virginity to her when I was 14, and we ended up getting quite serious, and it got to the point where in March of 2000, my parents and my girlfriend's parents actually made us break up. And we were like, I was so mad. I just made me hate my parents all the more, to no fault of their own. It made me so mad. And I, looking back now, I totally get it. They could see how unhealthy our relationship was, and they were just actually trying to protect me. But in the moment, all you can see is the emotion and the drama and the why me, and I can't believe you're doing this to me. You're ruining my life. Typical preteen going into a teenager. The emotions are raging, and that's what was going on with me. And so I was just super upset. I was convinced, this is the girl I'm going to be with forever. We love each other, and so we made a plan. Me and my girlfriend made a plan that we were actually going to run away to Texas and just get out of here and go live our own lives. And so I was 14 years old, and I stole my brother's car, and in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., and I drove to her house, about a half-hour drive, and we had a cab waiting for us there, and we had a cab because I kind of felt bad that I'd stolen my brother's vehicle, and I wanted him to be able to find it, so I wanted to be able to leave it at my girlfriend's house versus some bus depot where we were going to take a bus to Texas, and so we had a cab waiting at her house, and it was $400 for us both to get to Texas, $200 each. And so we had $200, but we still needed the other $200, and so what we were kind of banking on, what we were completely banking on, was my girlfriend's stepdad often had like a wad of cash in his wallet, like hundreds of dollars was not uncommon for him to have in there. And so that night when I got there, we're cabs waiting, we're ready to go, we just need that $200. And so my girlfriend crawls on the floor into her parents' bedroom and reaches up to the nightstand and grabs the wallet off and opens it up to get the money out, and there was nothing in it, not even $20, like it was empty. And looking back now, that was just totally the grace of God protecting us. And so we were $200 shy, and so we couldn't go. And we had to abort the plan, and so I had to drive back home and then wake up and go to school the next day, and I was super choked that I was in school and not on a bus to Texas with my girlfriend. And so anyway, it just kind of went from there, and we were forced to break up, and we tried staying connected. We tried sneaking cell phones. My parents would find them, and it just didn't work. And so I eventually had to move on from that relationship. And then in 2001, I was going to a new school, and I kind of made a whole new group of friends, both inside and outside of school. But the ones that I hung out with most were actually outside of school. And we just started getting into all kinds of stuff. I started to get like really even more angry and violent. I started to party and drink and smoked lots of weed, did lots of mushrooms, and just really started going down a path of what I didn't know at the time. I thought it was fun at the time. I thought I was having a great time, but I was really going down this path of destruction, and I had no idea how far down this road I was going to go. But nonetheless, I began. And so I ended up dropping out of school actually in 2001. I failed grade 10, and so I dropped out of school. And I actually tried to reconnect with my ex-girlfriend again, and my parents found out, and they're like, absolutely not, that's not happening. And so I just kind of hit that place again where I was just like, fine, you know what, I'm out of here. Like, if you're gonna keep trying to tell me how to live my life and make all my choices for me, I'll just go run away and live my own and make my own choices. And so that's what I did. I called my best friend Jesse, and I was like, hey man, I was like, can you come here and pick me up? He had a pickup truck, he had a lowrider at the time. And so I threw all my belongings that I had, my clothes, into 3 garbage bags, and he pulled up, and I just booked it out of the house. And I just finished getting into a big argument with my dad, and so I booked it out of the house and threw all my garbage bags in the back of the truck, and we took off. And I moved in with 3 friends downtown in Calgary, and I got a job at a gas station and just started to party hard, met all kinds of crazy people, and again just got really violent. I would get into lots of fights. I remember one time we were downtown, I got into a big brawl downtown, and the police came. And I would carry, like, my vehicle was like an armory. I had so many weapons in my car. So the police came, and they actually took all the weapons out of my vehicle, and they lined them up on my trunk, and then they went up and onto the top of the car, and then they went down onto the hood of the car, and then they kept going down the sidewalk. They were lining up the bats and the knives, the lead pipes, the chains. I had so much stuff, so many weapons, and so they lined them all up, and just kind of gives you an insight into how I was living at the time. It was just a crazy time, a real violent time for me. And so anyway, I went from living with those friends to living with another friend, and partied a ton. And then I actually, after that, I chose the street. I was like, I'm just gonna go live on the street. I'm basically here all the time anyway, and so I'd rather just live on the street. And so I did. And there was a homeless man named Henry who actually took me in. He was super kind, and he knew Jesus, and he had a heated parkade, and so he had a cardboard box in his heated parkade, and he would let me come and stay with him, and he kind of showed me some things and taught me the ropes a little bit about some street smarts, and he kind of took me under his wing. And I just remember he was like Christ to me. Looking back, he helped me out so much, and he was a really great man. And so anyway, I started smoking crack, and I was on the street and just living really rough and meeting all kinds of different people. I ended up in July of 2002. I was with my buddy Jesse again, same truck, and we're ripping down the secondary highway, and we end up getting T-boned, and I wasn't wearing my seatbelt. And we got catapulted into a telephone pole, and then the back of his truck also hit this other metal. There's another like metal pole, and it almost like bent the back of his pickup underneath itself, and my side was all caved in, and it was like the truck was totaled. It was absolutely totaled, and it was a miracle that I survived that, let alone walked away without a scratch. Me and him both walked away with no injuries. But what happened after the truck was totaled is I survived this car accident, but then the police come on scene, and I had a warrant out for my arrest. And so I was like, I survived this car accident, but now I got to go to jail. And I was just like, it's kind of a bad day. And so the officer, took me to the cell, and I'm sitting there in jail, and I'm just like reflecting on my life. And I'm just like, okay, you know what? I've made some pretty poor choices. Like, look at where it's got me. And in that moment, I just kind of felt God's presence come into the cell. And I went to the guard, and I asked the guard for a Bible. I said, hey, can I have a Bible? And he said, yeah, sure. So he got me one and brought it. And I just cried out to God. I said, Lord, I don't know how to find you in here. I don't know where you are, but I need you. I need your help, and I'm just going to open this book. I'm not searching nowhere. I am just opening it and I'm asking that you meet me there because I don't know what else to do, and I need your help. And so I opened it up, and it was amazing. I opened up right to Proverbs 23, it was 15 to 28, and God just spoke directly to my heart about what was going on in my life, the choices I was making, and what He wanted to do, and who He was, and how He wanted to deliver me from all the things of the world and bring me into the true identity of who I am as His son. And it was an amazing moment for me. And so I was, a little stressed out over everything that had gone on, and so I went to the guard and I was like, hey, you mind if I have a cigarette? And so he was a really nice officer. He actually let me out of the cell, and we went into the police garage together, and he let me have a smoke in there, and I processed with him a little bit. And he said, I think in the morning you should call your dad, and I think you should go home. And so that's what I did. After living on the streets for a few months, I called my dad, and he came down there. My dad was so amazing. There was a whole year where the Lord woke him up at 3 a.m. every single day to intercede and to pray for me. I had all kinds of people praying for me, and I'm convinced that I would not be here today had I not had those people interceding and praying for me. So my dad was amazing, and he came, he picked me up, took me home, and I actually tried going back to school in the fall. I'd like to say things got better after that, but they really didn't. But anyway, I tried going back to school in the fall, and then I dropped out again at Christmas, and I got to the point where I was just so, I was just kind of done with life. I was still, having issues with addiction. And so I remember one day I was just like, you know what, I'm done. Like, I'm done. This is too hard. And I just need to end it. I'm just going to kill myself. I just need to end it. And so I went into the gun safe. My dad always had all the guns. He's a really responsible gun owner. He has them all locked away. He has his ammunition locked away separately. But I knew where the keys were. And so I had my own shotgun. And so I got my own shotgun out. It was a really long 12 gauge. And I pump a round in. And I put it right to my head, but because it was so long, I couldn't really reach the trigger with my finger, and so I had to kind of try to get it with my toe, and so I'm holding the gun here, and I got tears are streaming down my face, and I'm just like, I'm done, and I go to pull it with the trigger with my toe, and all of a sudden it was like God just came, and He was like, no, and I just had this like, whoa, like, no. And I knew that I was like, like it shook me. It actually like scared me. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. And it was like something just snapped, and in a good way. And I was just like, I saw clear, and I was just like, whoa, that's not the answer. That's not the answer. And so I unloaded the shotgun, and I put it back, and moved on. And there's a few other times where I was tempted, but I always just knew like that solves nothing. That is not the answer. There's more to life than that. It's the most. It's just, yeah. Anyway, so I was so grateful that I didn't reach that trigger. And so, moving on from there, I actually in January of 2003, I got an invitation from my grandma to move to Victoria and try to finish my schooling out there. And so I thought, you know what? That sounds amazing. Like, I just need to get out of Calgary. I need to go start again. And so I was like, yes, I'm in. I wanted to get away from my parents. I'm still angry with them. I still don't like them. I still have bad attitudes. And it's all about me, myself, and I, and how everything's affecting me. And so I'm like, I just need to go where I can do what I want. And maybe grandma will let me. And so, plus I really love my grandma. And so anyway, I moved to Victoria in 2003, and I went to an independent learning center, and I was supposed to be in grade 11, but I hadn't passed grade 10 yet. So I focused on grade 10. I passed grade 10, and I was like, yes. I was like, I got my double digits. I don't need any more. I got grade 10. I am done. I hated school, and I was just like done. So I totally dropped out at that point. And just started getting into a lot of trouble. I started meeting different people, and I was still really hard inside. And so, if we change our external world without changing our internal world, then we'll find we're in the same problems no matter where you go, no matter what city you live in. Your internal is going to come out wherever you are. And so nothing had changed on my insides. And so all my problems were with me there because the problems were inside. They weren't external. And so I got into, I met a girl there that really liked me, and she got me into cocaine. And because she liked me, it was free. So I started doing a lot of cocaine. I remember one time I was on a bus, and there was a guy on the bus. I just went up to a stranger. I really wanted some marijuana, and so I just asked him. I said, "Hey man," I was like, "You got any weed?" And he's like, "No, I don't got any weed, but I got some meth. If you want to buy some meth, crystal meth." And I had never seen meth. I'd never seen anyone smoke meth, and so I was like, I did not care. I was like, whatever happened. Nothing shook me. Nothing fazed me. I just had no value for my life, and so I was just like, sure, yeah, I'll do crystal meth. So he's like, yeah, so you gotta, if you don't have a pipe, you gotta break a light bulb, and you put the crystal meth into the broken glass, and then you light it up underneath, and you gotta suck the smoke through with a straw, and kind of gave me the how-to without having a pipe. And so I thought, great. So I went to go do it. I did it by myself. But what he didn't tell me is that when you smoke crystal meth, when you inhale, you have to exhale immediately, otherwise it crystallizes in your lungs. And I was used to smoking weed, and when you smoke weed, you inhale and you hold it in as long as you can because it gets you higher. And so I treated crystal meth like weed, and so I would breathe. I breathed it in. I had 2 points. I smoked the whole thing, and I'd hold it in as long as I could, and then I'd breathe it out. And I tell you, I got absolutely annihilated. I remember lying on a bed, and the news was on, and this lady was talking about, I didn't even know what, but she was freaking me out. And all of a sudden these spikes, I felt like these spikes started to go through my head and into my brain. And I was just like, ah! And I was just a wreck. Anyway, the next day, when I came to, I was like sicker than I have ever been in my life. I could physically not get out of bed for 3 days. And so that was my introduction to meth. And you would think that if that was how that went for you, you would probably never want to do it again. But no, I did it many times more after that. In fact, I started roaming the streets more. I started living exactly like I was in Calgary, except even worse, because now I'm into crystal meth and cocaine. I'm smoking crack. I'm in halfway houses. I'm getting into fights. I'm getting into all kinds of trouble. And I actually left my grandma's house, even lived on the reserve for a bit. I lived in a tent on the coast, and I remember this one time. There's a number of times I almost died, but I'll just share two stories where I should have been dead. The first one was I was downtown, and I carried with me. I always carried with me because I was by myself a lot, and so I carried with me a mace. And I don't mean like the mace that you spray. I mean like medieval, man, like medieval mace, like the stick with the chain and the big spike ball. And I'd stuff the stick down my pants, and then I'd put the spike ball in my pocket. And when it was go time, I'd whip that sucker out, and I'd be ready to go. Because there's oftentimes I was outnumbered, and so. Anyway, so I come across this scene downtown in a Safeway parking lot where these two people I don't know. There's this guy that's kind of fighting with this girl and being real aggressive and real like bullying almost. And I was always been really protective of women, and so I'm like, what's going on? What are you doing? And so I kind of come up to him, and I found out that he owed her money, and she was asking for it, and he was getting upset. And I was just like, dude, pay her the money, pay her right now. And he was like, who the bleep are you, and who do you do? Going off. And so I whipped out my mace, and I'm like, come on! And he was like, whoa! And his eyes kind of turned to saucers, and he had a friend too, and so him and his friend jumped in the car, and they take off. And so I'm left kind of chatting with this girl, and I think she's kind of cute, and so we're just having a good chat, and then I'm hanging out, and then about 10 minutes later, he comes back. And he gets out of the car, and he comes right up by me, and he pulls out a handgun, and he's about to shoot like this. And without even thinking, this girl that I've just met comes and stands in front of me. She puts her arms around me like this, and she puts her head up where mine is so that he doesn't have a shot. And the people that are coming out of Safeway are like dropping their grocery bags, like, and so he's getting nervous because now there's people are seeing and they're noticing, and he doesn't have a shot. And so he gets in his car and he takes off. And man, again, looking back at that is the absolute grace of God. Like, and it was incredible for this girl to have that courage to do that. And whether she didn't think he'd shoot at her or what, I don't know. But God totally intervened and stepped in and saved my life. Another time I was on the reserve, I got super drunk, and I actually ended up stumbling in the dark, and I fell off like a legit cliff. I fell off a cliff. I was like a rag doll going all the way down, and the tide was out, and so I smashed on the bottom. I smashed my spine and the back of my head on these rocks that were at the bottom, and I was like, oh! and I was like paralyzed, like I could not move. And thank God that there was a few other people there that happened to see it, that I was partying with. They were sober enough to come and get me, because I couldn't move. And had they not seen that, the tide would have come in and I would have drowned. And so they pulled me, they got me back to the top, and they put me in my tent, and I couldn't walk for 3 days. And even today, if you actually look at my spine, there's still today a dent in my spine. And it's a miracle that I wasn't paralyzed. I didn't have a concussion. After 3 days, I got up, and it was like it never happened. My spine was still bruised, but it was like it never happened. And so again, I just know that God just totally saved my life. And there's lots more stories, but those are the two that came to mind that I just wanted to share, just to again give you an idea of, I was in a crazy lifestyle, and I should have died many times. So anyway, 2003, I moved back. Summer of 2003, I moved back to Calgary, and I'm still drinking, still doing my lifestyle followed me. I'm still doing lots of cocaine. I ended up getting into a big bar fight one night with a bunch of bouncers, and the bouncers had kicked the crap out of me, and I got so mad, and so I got up and I stabbed one of the bouncers, and the police came, and I was charged with assault, and spent the night in jail, and got out in the morning, and yeah, so I was on probation for a year, and man, I just became like a full-on alcoholic that fall. Like, I started to drink every single day, and it was just really bad. So then, fast forward to January of 2004, I ended up moving back to Victoria, and I'm still, an alcoholic and doing all the stuff, and still partying like crazy. But then I ended up dating my soon-to-be baby's mama, my son's mom, and so we start dating, and we were wild together. We partied all the time, and she went just as hard as I did, and so we did ecstasy and mushrooms and cocaine, and it was whatever we get our hands on is what we did. And I remember this one night I got into another fight on the reserve, and there was these guys that had pulled up in a vehicle and said something really derogatory to her, made me real mad. It was just me and her walking. I had a walking stick, and so they go to drive away, and I took the walking stick and I smashed out the back of their tail light as they went to drive away. So they slammed on the brakes, and they all jump out, and a couple of them rush me, and one goes at her. And it was like a regular fight. I was holding my own, and we were exchanging some hits, but I could remain standing. But all of a sudden, I looked over, and I saw how I was looking to see how she was doing, and I saw him like hit her right in the face. He punched her, and I went all out honey badger, man. Like, I lost it. And so I was like, "Wah!" And I pushed these guys off me, and I had a little knife on me, and I ran up to the guy. I was like, just started stabbing him like crazy, and they ended up picking him up, and they got him to the car, and they got sort of freaked out, and they took off. He ended up being a fairly well-known gang member, and he was in the hospital for 2 weeks. He totally survived, no permanent damage, thank God. But we had a lot of people looking for us, and so we actually had to flee the island. We had to get out of there, and so we come back to Calgary. She gets pregnant, and my son's born February 4th, 2005, to some fairly broken people. And so 2005, my son's born. That's when I was like, man, I got to grow up. I got to get a real job. I was working in a furniture place, just assembling and delivering furniture. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna get into a trade. I thought electrical would be a good idea, so I wanted to become an electrician. So I began that. But man, we were just in a really rough place. She started being interested in other guys, and I didn't want to marry her, and so we really hurt each other over and over and over again. And it got to the point where we finally broke up, like official, I think 2006, and I had to get drunk every day. I couldn't sleep unless I was drunk, and so I would just drink myself basically to sleep, and it was just an incredibly painful time in my life. We had just hurt each other so much. And then 2006, a really good friend of mine committed suicide, and that was really, really hard. It was just they were dark days, and I would get my son like every other weekend, and when I had him, I would be sober. because I wanted to be present with him. I at least knew that much, that I needed to be sober when I had him, and so I was. There's a couple times, that I would drink after he would go to bed, but when he was awake and I was with him, I would be sober. I was trying to do the best I could with what I had, but I was a pretty broken dude. So anyway, moving into January of 2007, I met a girl at a bar. She used to be a stripper, and we were wild together, man. Like we right back into all the craziness, the cocaine. We did drugs all the time. I couldn't even show up for work. It was just a really messy season. And then in March of 2007, she ended up having a horrible run-in with her boyfriend. He actually slit her throat, and she survived. And I was with her in the hospital as she recovered, and I stayed with her. And then a few weeks after she got out of the hospital, she ended up going back to him. So I was just like, whoa, you're crazy. Like, I'm out of here. If that's what I'm gone. And so broke up with her, and then. I got to the point where I was doing cocaine 6 nights a week, and all of my money that I was going towards that. And I got into crazy situations that I never should have walked away from. And I'd find myself in, I would wake up not having a clue where I was, and that was like a common occurrence. It wasn't like it was, and it happened a lot. And so anyway, I just knew that I was going to die soon. I just knew that I was going to die, and so I could feel it in my body. I was so hard on myself, and physically. And so I remember I went back to landscaping, and I remember I was raking gravel on the side of this house one day. I was working by myself, and I just collapsed, and I hit my knees, and I was just like, God, if you're real, if you love me as much as people say you do, then I need you to change me. I have tried to change, and I can't. I don't have any ability. I don't have the power to change. I need you. Help me. And when I prayed that for the first time in my life, I heard God's laughter. And Santa's got nothing on God's laughter. It's like deep from in his belly. It's like it rises up. It's the definition of joy. I've never heard anything like it in my life. It was like it was inside me and around me. It's hard to explain, but I heard the laughter of God, and I knew he wasn't laughing at me. I knew he was laughing with joy, because I had finally turned to him, and I had finally called upon him, and I had finally reached my breaking point where I realized I can't, but you can. And the Lord, I had this this flashback of when he gave me this flashback of when I was sitting by myself in Victoria one night. I was really drunk and stoned, and I was pretty depressed, and just, I was a mess. And I felt the presence of God come and sit with me, and he was so kind. And I was amazed at how he was. He didn't come there and say, what do you think you're doing? You grew up in the church. You've read your Bible. You know better than this. Why are you being such an idiot? None of that. He just wanted to be with me, and he was present with me in the midst of my sin. It's like when we're at our worst, God's at his best. When sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. And that grace isn't there it's not like an excuse to get away with sin. It empowers us to overcome sin. But I experienced his kindness in that moment, and it wasn't until years later that I read Romans 2:4 that says it's the kindness of God that leads to repentance. In other words, it's the kindness of God that leads people to change. And I had that flashback when I cried out to him, and I heard him laughing, and I just remembered, oh yes, you're so kind. You're for me. You're not against me. And then I felt the Lord said, I'm going to get you, and I'm going to get you really good. And in my heart, I knew what he was saying was that I'm going to get a hold of your life, and I will never let you go. And I was like, yes, okay, Lord. And I picked up my rake and, keep going. And so anyway, I didn't tell anyone I had prayed that prayer. And about a week later, my mom called me, and she was pretty nervous with what she wanted to propose to me. But looking back, I'm so grateful for her boldness, because she knew I was in a bad space. I'd been in a bad space for over a decade. And so she said, I heard about this ministry school, and a friend of our son went there who also battled with some things, and he went there and it went really well for him. And I just thought, you want to check it out? Maybe, here's the number. And I thought, ministry school? I was like, yeah, right, ministry school. Like, I'm the last person who should go to ministry school. There's no way. Not only would it's the last place that I would want to go, it's the last place anybody would want me to go, especially if you work there. But anyway, as I'm thinking this, I all of a sudden remembered about the prayer that I prayed, and I felt God, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, what if this is actually God's answer to my prayer? And so I thought, well, it's no harm to call and just to see. So I made the phone call, and I ended up speaking to the director of the ministry school, and we talked back and forth for a little bit, and then he says, and what's your name, by the way? And I said, it's Justin. He said, Justin what? I said, Justin Menzies. And he's like, Justin Menzies? He's like, we're expecting you September 15th. Like, you showed up in our computer system the other day. We're expecting you September 15th. And I was like, oh yeah, right, cool, yeah, click. I was like, what? And I realized in my heart, I just knew it. I was like, God, you registered me in that school. And later on, talking to the director and stuff, I literally just showed up in their computer system, and I know the Lord registered me in school, and that's how I knew that I had to go. So I had cried out to him. I believe it was in July or August, and ministry school was September 15th. So I just go on living my life. I can't change. I'm still drinking. I'm still doing coke the same amount of times. And I want change, but I don't know how to change. I want God, but I don't know how to get him, and I don't know how to go about this. And so I'm just like, okay, ministry school, make it to ministry school. And so 3 days before I leave for ministry school, I end up going on a crazy 3-day bender, and I don't even remember those 3 days. I did all the drugs, all the booze. It was just, I don't even know if I slept, but it was nuts. And so for 3 days, I was just like, I went hard. And then on the way to ministry school, I leave from ministry school, I'm driving from Calgary to Vancouver, and on the way to ministry school, I'm throwing out crack pipes and porn mags and beer cans and knives and lead pipes, and I'm cleansing as I'm going to ministry school, because I told the Lord, I said, Father, I'm going to come to this ministry school, and I will give you my whole heart. I will give you my whole life. I will surrender it all to you. But I just want you to know that if this doesn't work, I'm a dead man. I'm going to go back to my sin. I'm going to go back to my addictions, and I will die in them. And so please, God, help me. I will do my part. I will give you myself to the best ability that I know how, but then I need you to transform me. I need you to change me. And that was my prayer, and I meant it, and I did it. So I went to ministry school, and I kid you not, I should have had crazy withdrawals. I should have had the sweats and the cold. I should have been a wreck, and I didn't go through a single withdrawal. The ministry school had no idea what they were getting into, what they were receiving. But it was supernatural. It's absolutely impossible. And so the drugs, the booze, it was gone. The smoking was still really hard for me, but the drugs and the booze was just like cut off, and no withdrawals. And so God was already so moving on my life. And the people at the ministry school were incredible. They were the hands and feet of Jesus to me. They were the love of God to me. They never gave up on me, and I gave them a lot of opportunity to give up on me. It was not easy. I was so rough around the edges. I made so many mistakes, and they never gave up on me. And I'm so grateful for that season of my life and who those people are. They know who they are, and I'm just so thankful for them, because they didn't give up when they had every reason to, which is just like God. And so anyway, I learned a lot of amazing things about God in ministry school. It blew my mind, but at the same time, it was like church. I didn't get to know God through that. I got to know him in my bedroom. I got to know God when I was alone and I was crying out to him. I was excited. I started getting into the Word, and I opened up the Psalms. I started going through the Psalms, and I was just like, oh, I was like, God, have you been like this the whole time? Like, you've been this awesome the whole time? I was just like, you're amazing. And I was just having this revival inside my heart of like, man, I had you so misjudged. I thought you were this one way, but you're like completely opposite. You're better than I've ever thought. You're the kindest person I've ever met. You are so full of mercy and love and goodness and gentleness. And I was just blown away. I was just like, you're the best. I can't believe I've gone this long without knowing you and walking with you. And so I had this revival happen in my heart, and I just started to grow. in that, and I've never looked back. And so anyway, that was 2007. I ended up meeting my wife's parents actually in 2008, and then through that I obviously met my wife, and that's a whole other 2-year story. It's a story for another time. But that gives you an idea of what God's brought me out of. And I absolutely love being a disciple of Christ. I love being a believer. The longer I'm a believer, the more pumped I get. I mean, I used to feel bad. I used to feel so bad when I would feel happy. I would get like these slivers of happiness every now and then, and I would feel so bad because I was like, I do not deserve to be happy. And God even delivered me from that. And He has given me His joy. He's put it inside of me. It's not for sale. It's mine. It's from Him. It belongs to me. And I just love my life in Him. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it means it's worth it. And so the next few videos, I just want to, this video I obviously got into what God's brought me out of. And in the next few videos, as we go through things topically, I want to get into what God's brought me into, because the whole born again experience is just the beginning. It's not just I've got my ticket to heaven and I'll try and be a good person now until I die. It's the absolute transformation of life. It's becoming Christ-like. It's like when a baby's born, they have to grow up and mature. And it's no different when we're born again. We need to grow up, like Ephesians 4, into the full stature of the measure of Christ, that we would be filled with the fullness of God. It's like 1 Peter, where it says that we are now partakers of His divine nature. There is so much more to the believer's life. We are to be maturing and growing in faith and growing in love and growing in wisdom and growing in knowledge and growing in our walk with Him. And so there's so much stuff that is so exciting about being a believer, and I'm just pumped, obviously, to get into it. So anyway, that's my testimony. Thank you so much for watching. Bless you, and we'll see you next time.